Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. I'm joined by the Pete's, Pete Worth and Pete Mohan. And fellas, fresh off one of our hottest podcasts of the year, one of our realest and harshest takes against Marquette basketball. Lo and behold, they turn around and deliver a resounding victory over 10th-ranked Villanova Wildcats in Milwaukee, a 71-60 victory. Pete Worth, you were on the last pod. What the hell do you make of what just happened?
Oh, we have a terrific team, Mike. I'm convinced now that we are terrific. You cannot convince me that we're not going to the Final Four. I'm so high on this team. I'm thinking 12-4, first place Big East. And don't stop me now. The accolades keep coming.
Speaking of riding high, Pete Mohan, I know you are riding high after that victory. You had to have loved that.
Well, as Leon Black would like to say, topsy-turvy that motherfucker. Topsy-turvy they ass. I mean,
they ate Snickers bar. They left garbage. They threw it all up in J. Ride's face.
Yeah.
This is like
they step outside of his asshole.
This is like the same conversation, but in reverse, that we had with the Wisconsin and Purdue games earlier in the year. And I think similar conversations in the past where you're like, well, if you ask me, would we go 1-1 in those two games? And which win would you rather have? And then it turns out that way. But I just think that the thing to note through two games in the Big East is that there's a lot of good teams, and home court advantage means a lot when you have such a densely grouped bunch of teams who are equally competitive. Mm-hmm. I mean, you got to give Creighton and the fans all the credit. They came out, they were allowed. That's a tough environment to play in. We've said that in the past, and it looks like Marquette fans made it a tough environment on Villanova as well. So
yeah,
you get the home win, and I think that we should be grateful for being 1-1 right now.
One thing looking back and listening to the pod we did a couple days ago, I think it's worth mentioning that I think our reaction, maybe this is stating the obvious, our reaction wasn't in and of the fact that we lost. It was that we looked like we didn't give a shit, and we looked like we weren't putting any effort into it. And I think the one thing I take away from this Villanova game, because let's get into it here, that first half, not the second half, that first half, though, was probably the most engaged, energetic, locked in I've seen a Marquette team at least since the second half of the Purdue game this year, if not, since February of last year. I mean, they were really locked in. All of that said, Pete Worth, I don't regret anything that we said in that pod, because I think a lot of what we said in terms of Marcus needing to succeed for this team to, get a good win proved to be true in the game, in the big win over Villanova.
Yeah, I was going to say that if you hadn't mentioned it. I mean, my opening little soliloquy there was in jest, as people who listened to the previous pod probably know. But we weren't predicting in that last pod, even though we were all very upset and were speaking mostly ill of Marquette. None of us predicted that we couldn't, possibly beat Villanova. I don't think any one of us expected us to come out like that, because they played pretty much a flawless half of basketball. They didn't turn the ball over. They played great defense. And what I loved to see was us attacking right immediately at the start of possessions. And that, I think that's what was the key, along with our incredible defensive intensity, was our ability to attack Nova off the bounce right at the start of the possession. And that got the offense going. It got, most importantly, Kobe McEwen going. He had a flow to his game we haven't seen. He started taking the ball to the basket, and eventually his three started hitting. And, that's what we kind of expected all year long from him. And that was it was awesome to see that first half. And then, we'll get to the defense maybe a little later, but the defense led by Theo John was awesome too.
Yeah, I think there were two main keys here, and that's the interior defense did a complete U-turn from the Creighton game.
Theo played like a man.
Yeah, even Ed Morrow was active on defense. Marcus even got a steal on fronting a guy early in the game. That was I don't think I've ever seen him do that.
I don't think so either. Yeah,
that was nice. So I was just really impressed with, and you got to give some credit to the coaching staff as well to turn around that interior defensive performance, because it didn't look like the same team defensively when we were talking about the Creighton game. But this is, hopefully the type of interior defense we should be able to expect from this squad going forward. And then the other thing is winning the battle of the free throws. Getting 30 attempts to only 5 for Villanova was a huge advantage, and it just shows you how dangerous this offense can be and how efficient it can be if you have both Marcus and Kobe going downhill towards the basket. And, I sent you guys text in the group text when he got that, when Kobe got that and one, like, thank God he finally went to the hoop, because that's really honestly what triggered the rest of his game going off. He got a little comfortable, hit some free throws, saw the ball go in the hoop, and then, he made those couple threes. So it was a great bounce back performance from him, but getting him going downhill is, I think, really what set him off.
Yeah, and Villanova's defense in general isn't great, but their interior defense, they don't really have shot blockers either, so that does help. But anything to get Kobe going, I'll take it. There's not too many Big East teams that has great interior D and imposing shot blockers, I don't think.
Well, Seton Hall has a couple.
Seton Hall has a couple guys. But no, it was great to see. And, the thing about our defense was that, yes, we were up by a lot, partially to that and partially because of our great offense. But despite Villanova needing to come back via the three, I think that they were discouraged early on after they did get their shot blocked a few times from attempting to get into the paint. And if we can continue to do that and make sure, that Theo can stay on the floor, and if Theo can't, that Ed is filling his role adequately and performing those sorts of things. Not quite up to Theo's capability, as we probably know, but at least that there's that presence. And
I will say
that's huge, and that's what we haven't had. We haven't had up until Theo. We just need that consistently.
Well, and the big stat there is that Theo played 33 minutes in this game versus what did he play, like 8 minutes against Creighton or something like that? Right. So I think there's some correlation there to the interior defense and how many minutes we're getting out of Theo.
So we saw early on – sorry, Mike, just one quick thing. We saw early on from the plus-minus numbers that Paint Touches always puts out that Theo, when he was right, earlier in the year, he was always at the top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of Theo John, and another note on Kobe McEwen, but Theo John spoke with John Steppe, who's a reporter for an intern at the Journal-Sentinel, also a Marquette student, who we actually had on the pod, friend of the pod a couple of years ago. And John Steppe quoted Theo John after the game is saying this about his hand. Mentally, it was messing with me for a while. Theo apparently had the option to redshirt this year and have surgery following the exhibition game, but Theo opted to play through it and have surgery at the end of the season. The quote finishes from Theo, "It's going to hurt no matter what." That was posted right after the conclusion of the Villanova game the other day. I thought that was a really illuminating quote. I saw a lot of folks have the same reaction on Twitter. I had no idea, his hand was hurting him to that extent. It it answers why Theo, at least, has been so off this year up until yesterday. I don't quite know what put him in the mood to show up like he did yesterday, but that's a peek behind the window that Theo was dealing with a lot more than we knew.
Keep that sucker on ice, Theo.
And I thought one other thing, we mentioned Kobe McEwen, and we were hard
That's all
on
I got.
we were hard on Kobe, in the last pod. I think deservedly so, based on his performance so far this year. It was also really clear from some comments that Kobe made after the Villanova win that they may have had a players only meeting following the Creighton game. It seems like the players really took it upon themselves. In part, I think that's what drove the result we saw in the first half on Monday, or first half against Villanova, when they came out so locked in and engaged. So interesting to see some of these things that are behind the scenes of how it came together to put that first half together and what was one of the better halves of basketball this year.
And I also want to say, beyond just the first half, and we did come out cold at the beginning of the second half as well, but
Careful.
in general, we basically held them at an arm's distance throughout that entire second half. I think it dipped down to 8 points maybe at one point, but that, to me, that's impressive. It's really hard with a well-coached Villanova team to not let that lead dip down to 6, 5, 4 points, something like that. And to be able to sustain that, even though we came out really cold at the beginning of the second half, I think that is another testament to the defense, that we were able to get stops even when the offense wasn't clicking to prevent that super large run. And I think that in addition, having the home crowd, I think that's one of those things where if you're in a road environment and you go cold like that, it's easy for that to get out of hand. So I think that helps too. But I think that the second half was almost as impressive as the first half, because they were able to continue to run their game plan, even though Marcus didn't have as many touches in the second half. The offense seemed to be clicking fairly well, other than the shots not falling, even though we turned it over a little more. But consistency, and we kept them from having that giant run, and that was key to coming out on top.
A stat that really jumps off the page to me, and I don't think either of you mentioned this, but we've talked about the free throws and how we were able to get to the line. Marquette finished 26 of 30 at 86% from the free throw line for the game. Villanova, just 5 free throw attempts for the entire game. Right. The disparity between those two is telling to how the game was played, telling to how Marquette played the game.
Defending without fouling. And it's shocking. I didn't realize that until just now, actually.
Well, in 26, if I'm reading this correctly, fast break points, which is what we were belaboring on the last pod as well, is that Creighton looked so good in transition and on fast breaks, and we were kind of jealous of that, and we performed well today or Saturday in that game. And I do have to mention when we were struggling so badly in that second half, I think we had 5 points with like 7.5 minutes to go, which that hurt. That was hurting the stomach a little bit. But a guy who really hadn't shown his presence outside of some good defensive play was Sakara Nim. Had 2 gigantic 2-point jump shots, which I was also belaboring on last pod. I was belaboring a lot of things last pod. Yep. But those were probably the most clutch baskets of the game, because nobody else could hit anything. And that was kind of when it was in a little bit of a danger mode. We're like, man, shit, if we blow this lead where we've been in control the entire game against number 10 Nova, that will suck. And Sakar, with those 2 shots, prevented that. I thought were 2 of the biggest baskets of the game.
Definitely.
So here's where I think we need to go from here. That game against Villanova, as you both have outlined, was really encouraging to see. The energy level, the execution, up and down the roster, really Kobe McEwen, Theo John, the interior defense, really impressive. They did that at home with an incredible crowd. with a hot Marcus Howard start, with Villanova having to tweak its defensive game plan against Marcus Howard. They did that under perfect circumstances. And I think up until this point, we've seen this team struggle to figure out who they are, to bring energy, at least this season. And so the question for me is, can they replicate that effort? And I'm not saying every effort is going to be, what I consider to be a balls to the wall, 150%. But so far this year, that game this weekend was the outlier for the season, at least in terms of energy, effort, engagement, and being locked in. And frankly, they need to show me that they can do that more consistently, at least bring that. Maybe this will be a springboard for that. But that's the question I pose to you. Do you think this is going to be some sort of catalyst, or is this more so just a flash in the pan based on being at home, a number 10 ranked team coming to town, and the loss to Creighton just a few days before?
I think I know both of our answers on this.
I'd love to hear them.
But I just tend to believe that it's more of a flash in the pan. Yeah. And that's mostly because of our inability to consistently provide on the offensive end. And if teams come at Marcus Howard with two defenders, which I thought Creighton did really well, and Nova didn't really try that much, which I found surprising, we're gonna struggle. And we're going to struggle on the road. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think we can have similar performances against many of these Big East teams, but we need to see it on the road. Mike, I'm not sure if Wojo game planning specifically to show you what the team can do is going to be in the.
I don't know who the hell else he's trying to please.
It's going to be in the game plan. Maybe he listened to the last pod. We should, definitely.
It was a good one.
But I tend to believe that the inconsistency is what we're going to see from this team going forward. I just think that's the nature of the team. I think they can finish above 500 in the Big East, but I don't think by very much.
And it would take a few breaks going their way in order for them to do so.
Pete, do you feel the opposite?
I think one other thing I'd like to discuss before I fully answer the question is, I know, we think, Villanova was a top 10 team and Creighton is unranked, but it seemed to me like Creighton, it's a better team than Villanova. I don't know. That's just the impression that their backcourt is so much more dynamic than Villanova's and very difficult to guard. I know that they ended up losing to Butler by, I think, 14 points. Not really sure what happened in that game.
Yeah.
Butler's a good team, obviously. But I don't know. Guarding Creighton's backcourt just is a lot more difficult than guarding the offensive weapons that are on Villanova. So I think there is some of that, is that we played a team in Creighton that was, kicking off their Big East season, and maybe people aren't really, like voters and such, aren't necessarily attuned to how good Creighton might be. And people are always going to rate Villanova a little higher. Obviously, they've had some big wins. They knocked off number 1 Kansas, of course. But I think that there's some of that at play too, is that we might be not knowing really how good Creighton might be, or is Villanova honestly looks like a 9-9 Big East team to me right now.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think that there's some of that at play. I think really the question we're asking is, can we get the consistency in defensive effort every game? I think that there's enough offensive efficiency, for God's sakes, we're the 3rd best 3-point shooting team in the entire country right now. And our defense has been pretty good as well, but it really depends on that effort. And the 3 losses that we've had, we've kind of gotten pummeled. And I don't know if it's just the way that our team is mentally, that if we get that double-digit deficit, we can't mentally crawl back into it. I don't know what it is.
Isn't it interesting that all 3 of our losses have just been outright pummelings, kind of in the same fashion as one another, right? They've been like just 3-point barrages and just kind of sloppy defense. When you talk about Wisconsin, Maryland, and Creighton trying to run, shooters off the 3-point line and just not being able to get there in time. There is a definite symmetry to our losses and a recipe for how you can, beat us. And maybe you're right, Pete. Maybe it is the defensive effort or the lack thereof.
And also, I will say too that, I mean, if the defense is playing aggressively, that does lead to some of our best offense, which is transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we saw that Marcus hit a couple transition threes, and these kind of things are infectious. I mean, the way that Theo and Ed block shots, they can slap it off the backboard and rebounds out to the 3-point line. It's a fast break. I mean,
right. Yeah, that gets the team energized. Block shots like that. Yeah.
So I don't know what it was in the Creighton game, because it wasn't like they have some dominant interior presence. That was what was most frustrating for me, is these are mostly guards scoring at the rim at will. And so I don't know. I don't know what we can expect from that, but I think that if we have consistent effort on defense, especially on the interior, this team can have a really good season, because the offense is pretty efficient, pretty consistent.
And as long as we don't do one thing.
What's that?
Throw Ed Morrow the ball in the post.
Oh, my God.
Don't throw Ed Morrow the ball in the post. Don't even think about it. Don't even attempt it, because we can't even do it to begin with. So don't do it.
And unless Theo is standing wide open off a pick and roll or something, don't dump it to him either. I mean,
right. Yeah, unless he's rolling to the basket.
We need a Devontae Gardner in there with soft hands, because every
soft booty.
On this team,
both of those things.
Yeah, somebody get these guys some donuts. Their hands are made of stone. They're like too muscular. I think that the muscles are even in their hands. They're like hands are muscle bound. Yeah, crazy.
All right, folks. So that's going to wrap it up for our quick reaction pod to the big win over Villanova on Saturday. Marquette next travels to Providence, Rhode Island, and faces off against Providence.
They're at home.
They're at home, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Faces off against Providence at home on Tuesday, January 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern on Fox Sports 1. So that will be your midweek game for Marquette. Ken Pom has that as a 9-point Marquette victory at home.
Can't overlook Providence with Seton Hall coming up next Saturday. It's got to get a dub at home against Providence.
Yeah, and they obviously struggled mightily to begin the year, but they've got 3 wins in a row against 3 decent teams: Texas, Georgetown, and DePaul. Beat DePaul in Chicago. So we know, obviously, we would laugh at that, in years prior, but DePaul pretty good this year. So they are coming in hot. So
never underestimate Ed Cooley either. I'm sure if we why don't we put up a poll, Mike? Who's a better coach, Ed Cooley or Wojo? What would you see? What percentage do you think we'd see?
And tag Providence in that too, okay. So that we get unbiased. We get completely unbiased. Oh wait, Mike, we got one more thing.
Uh-oh.
Wojo was talking about real chili with John Fanta.
That's true. Yeah,
he mentioned that.
John wanted Ed Cooley to go there.
John Fanta asked Wojo what restaurant he recommends for Ed Cooley and the Providence team, because they're going to be in town for a little bit. And Wojo said, "Go to Real Chili at 3 a.m. That's when it's the best." So, which that was like a little blip of dry humor that we rarely see from Wojo. I thought it was great. I'm really pissed off that John Fanta didn't come back and mention, us, being a friend of the program, but it was still good.
He wasn't even there when he, mentally, he was just in sports in his head when he was talking to us. He was blacked out. He wasn't even present.
Like most people at Real Chili at 3 a.m.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Signing, I'm your host, Mike Lavender, signing off again for the Pete's. Thanks, as always, for listening. We'll talk to you next time here on the Real Chili Podcast.
Goodbye, nerds.
Bring one out.